The moment my mother-in-law said those words to me, standing in the foyer of the house my dead husband had built with his own hands, I felt something shift inside my chest. Not break, shift, like a lock clicking into place. Pack up and get out. You don't belong here. Go live on the stairwell for all I care. She said it 3 hours after we buried Michael. 3 hours. The dirt on his casket hadn't even settled yet, and Karen was already standing in the doorway of the master bedroom, my bedroom, with her arms crossed and her jaw set like concrete. She had that look, the one that said she'd been rehearsing this moment, maybe for years. I was still wearing my black dress. My shoes were by the door because Michael always hated shoes on the hardwood floors, and even on the day of his funeral, I couldn't break the habit. My feet were bare on the cold oak, and I remember thinking how strange it was that my toes were freezing while the rest of my body felt like it was on fire. I didn't argue. I didn't scream. I didn't remind her that the house was in Michael's name and that I was his wife. I just looked at her, really looked at her, and nodded. And then I smiled, not because I was happy, not because I was crazy, because in that moment, standing barefoot in my own home, while my mother-in-law tried to throw me out like yesterday's garbage, I realized something that changed everything. She had no idea about the $20 million. She had no idea about the house in Tuscany. She had no idea about any of it. And I decided right then and there that she wouldn't find out from me. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me go back. Let me tell you about Michael, about us, about the life we built before everything fell apart and then rebuilt itself into something I never could have imagined. I met Michael Whitmore at a Home Depot in Columbus, Ohio, on a Saturday morning in March 2014. I know, not exactly the stuff of romance novels. I was 26, trying to figure out how to fix a leaking faucet in my studio apartment because I couldn't afford a plumber. I was standing in the plumbing aisle, holding 2 different washers, staring at them like they were written in Mandarin. "It's the one on the left," a voice said behind me. I turned around and saw this tall guy in a flannel shirt with paint on his jeans and sawdust in his hair. He had brown eyes and this crooked smile that made him look like he was always about to tell you a joke. "How do you know which faucet I have?" I asked. "I don't," he said, "but the one on the left fits about 80% of standard kitchen faucets, so statistically, you're better off." "Are you a plumber?" He laughed. "Software engineer, but I flip houses on the side. I'm Michael." "Ashley," I said, "and if this doesn't fix my faucet, I'm blaming you." "Fair enough, but if it does fix it, you owe me a coffee." It fixed the faucet. I owed him a coffee. That coffee turned into dinner, and dinner turned into weekends spent together, and weekends turned into me moving into his little 2-bedroom house in Westerville that he'd renovated himself. Every cabinet, every tile, every piece of trim, Michael had done it with his own hands. He was the kind of guy who noticed things. He noticed when I was tired before I said anything. He noticed when I changed my hair by half an inch. He noticed when the neighbor's kid left his bike in the driveway and would quietly move it to the porch so it wouldn't get stolen. Michael moved through the world like he was trying to leave it a little better than he found it. We got married in October 2016. Small ceremony, backyard wedding at his parents' house. His mom, Karen, made the cake herself. 3 tiers, buttercream frosting, little sugar flowers on top. She hugged me that day and said, "Welcome to the family, sweetheart." And I believed her. God help me, I believed her. Here's the thing about Karen Whitmore. She wasn't a monster. Not at first. She was a 62-year-old widow who'd lost her husband Frank to a heart attack when Michael was 19. She'd raised Michael and his younger sister Brenda on a teacher's salary, and she wore that sacrifice like a badge. Every conversation eventually circled back to what she'd given up, what she'd endured, what she was owed. And Michael, my sweet, patient, brilliant Michael, he felt that debt in his bones. He called her every single day. He mowed her lawn on Saturdays. When her furnace broke in January, he didn't just pay for a new one. He installed it himself, spent the whole weekend crawling around her basement. I respected that. I admired it even. A man who loves his mother is a man who knows how to love. But there's a line between loving your mother and being owned by her. And Michael lived right on that line, balancing like a tightrope walker who didn't realize the net had been removed. For the first 2 years of our marriage, things were good, really good. I was working as an office manager at a dental practice, and Michael's career was taking off. He'd been developing software on the side, some kind of data analytics platform for small businesses. I didn't fully understand what it did, but I understood the late nights, the cold dinners, the way his eyes would light up when he talked about algorithms and scalability. "This is going to be big, Ash," he told me one night. We were lying in bed and he was showing me mock-ups on his laptop. I mean really big, not just for us, for everyone. "I believe you," I said, and I meant it. What I didn't know then, what Michael kept close to his chest, was just how big it would actually become. He wasn't exaggerating. He wasn't dreaming. He was building something worth millions, and he was doing it so quietly that even I didn't fully grasp the scope of it. Michael had this philosophy about money. He'd watched his dad work himself into an early grave chasing overtime shifts, and he'd watched his mom scrape by on a pension. And he decided early on that he would never let money be the thing that defined him. So even as his company grew, even as the revenue started climbing, we lived the same way. Same house in Westerville, same used Honda Accord, same Friday night routine of takeout Chinese and a movie on the couch. The only extravagance Michael ever allowed himself was a trip to Italy in 2019. We spent 2 weeks in Tuscany, Florence, Siena, little hill towns with cobblestone streets and cypress trees that looked like they'd been painted by God himself. Michael fell in love with it. He'd stand on these terraces overlooking the vineyards, and this peace would come over his face that I'd never seen anywhere else. "Someday," he said, standing on a balcony in Montepulciano with a glass of Brunello in his hand, "I'm going to buy a house here, a little stone farmhouse with olive trees and a view of the valley." "Someday," I agreed, leaning into him. I didn't know he'd already started looking. I didn't know he'd already contacted a realtor in Siena. Michael was a planner, quiet, methodical, always 3 steps ahead. He didn't tell me things until they were done, because he wanted the joy of surprising me. That was his love language, the grand reveal. Back home, Karen started coming over more. At first, it was Sunday dinners, which was fine. Then it was Wednesday lunches. Then it was unannounced Wednesday lunches. Then it was unannounced Tuesday mornings when I was still in my pajamas, drinking coffee in the kitchen, and she'd just walk in with her spare key and start reorganizing my pantry. "You keep the pasta on the wrong shelf," she told me once, moving boxes around without asking. "There's no wrong shelf for pasta, Karen," I said, trying to keep my voice light. "There is in my son's house," she replied. "My son's house, not your house, not your and Michael's house. My son's house." I let it go. I let a lot of things go in those early years. The comments about my cooking, the way she'd rearranged the living room furniture when I wasn't home, the time she told Michael, in front of me, that he should have married Jennifer Hadley from church because she knows how to keep a proper home. Michael would always smooth it over. "She doesn't mean it like that, Ash. That's just how she is. She'll warm up to you. Give her time." Time. That was always the answer. Give her time. I gave her 6 years. Then, in the fall of 2022, everything changed. Michael came home one evening with a look on his face that I couldn't quite read. He sat me down at the kitchen table, took both my hands in his, and said words that rearranged the architecture of our entire life. "Databridge got acquired," he said. "The deal closes next month." "Acquired?" I repeated. "By who?" "Meridian Technologies." "Ash," he paused, and his eyes were doing that thing, that light, but bigger this time, brighter, almost scared. "The offer is $22 million. The kitchen went silent. I could hear the refrigerator humming. I could hear a dog barking 3 houses down. I could hear my own heartbeat thudding in my ears like a drum. 22. I couldn't finish the sentence. "After taxes, fees, legal costs. We're looking at roughly 20 million net, give or take. I stared at him. My husband, the guy from Home Depot with sawdust in his hair, the guy who still drove a 2015 Honda Accord and argued with me about whether we needed the premium streaming package. "Michael," I whispered, "what do we do?" He squeezed my hands. "We do what we've always done. We live our life. We just live it with a bigger safety net." And then he told me the part that made me cry. "I bought the house," he said, "the farmhouse in Tuscany, the one from Montepulciano. I've been working on it for 6 months. It's ours, Ash. It's done." I covered my mouth with both hands. The tears came fast and hot. "But here's the thing," he said, and his voice dropped. "I don't want anyone to know. Not yet. Not my mom, not Brenda, not the neighbors, nobody. I've seen what money does to families, and I'm not letting it do that to us." I nodded. I understood. I'd seen it too. Lottery winners whose relatives came crawling out of the woodwork, inheritances that turned siblings into enemies, windfalls that destroyed more than poverty ever could. So we kept it secret. $20 million, a farmhouse in Tuscany, and not a soul knew except Michael, me, and our attorney, a sharp-eyed woman named Patricia Langford, who handled everything with the discretion of a CIA operative. Michael set up trusts. He restructured everything so that if anything happened to him, I would be protected. He was meticulous about it, almost obsessive. I thought he was just being careful. I didn't know he was being prophetic. In February 2023, Michael started getting headaches, bad ones, the kind that made him close his eyes in the middle of conversations, press his fingers to his temples, and go quiet for long stretches. I told him to see a doctor. He said it was stress. I told him again. He said he'd go next week. Next week became next month. By the time he finally went, it was April, and the doctor didn't say stress. The doctor said glioblastoma. I remember the exact moment the neurologist said the word. We were in a beige office with fluorescent lights and a plastic plant in the corner, and the doctor's mouth was moving, but all I could hear was a high-pitched ringing, like someone had set off a fire alarm inside my skull. Michael reached over and grabbed my hand, and his grip was so tight it hurt, and I thought, this is not happening. This is not our life. We just got everything. We just got the farmhouse and the future and the safety net, and now you're telling me the net has a hole in it the size of a canyon? Michael fought. God, he fought. Chemo, radiation, a clinical trial at the Cleveland Clinic. He lost 30 pounds. He lost his hair. He lost the ability to drive, then to walk without help, then to finish a sentence without losing his train of thought. But he never lost his clarity about one thing. "Don't tell my mother about the money," he said. We were in the hospital. It was August. The leaves outside were still green, impossibly green, and Michael was the color of old paper. "Promise me, Ashley, not until you're ready, not until you're safe." "Safe from what?" I asked. He looked at me, and in his eyes I saw something I'd never seen before. Fear. Not of dying, of what would happen to me after. "Promise me," he whispered. "I promise," I said. Michael died on September 14th, 2023, a Thursday. It was raining, and 4 days later, I stood in the foyer of our house in Westerville, barefoot on the cold hardwood floors, while his mother told me to pack my bags and get out. She didn't know about the 20 million. She didn't know about Tuscany. She didn't know about the trusts or Patricia Langford or any of it. All Karen Whitmore knew was that her son was gone, and I was standing in what she believed was her inheritance. And as I looked at her face, that hard, certain, righteous face, I realized Michael had known. He'd known exactly what she would do. He'd planned for it. He'd prepared me for it, even from his hospital bed, even with his brain being eaten alive. My husband had spent his last months on Earth making sure his mother couldn't destroy me. I just didn't know yet how far he'd gone to make that happen, or what I'd find when I finally opened the envelope Patricia Langford handed me 2 days later, the one marked, "For Ashley, open when she makes her move." Karen was already calling a locksmith. I could hear her on the phone in the kitchen, changing the locks on my own front door. I went upstairs, packed one bag, and walked out into the September rain. But I was smiling. Because the game Karen thought she was winning, it hadn't even started yet. I drove to the only place I could think of, a Hampton Inn off I-270, about 15 minutes from the house. Our house. My house. The house Michael built with his own 2 hands, where Karen was now calling a locksmith like she owned the place. The parking lot was half empty. The rain had slowed to a drizzle, and the neon sign buzzed and flickered in the gray September evening. I sat in the car for a long time, Michael's old Honda Accord, the one he refused to trade in even after $20 million landed in our accounts. And I just breathed, in and out, in and out, like the grief counselor at the hospital had taught me during those last weeks. My phone buzzed, then again, then a third time. Karen. 3 texts in rapid succession. I changed the locks. Don't bother coming back. I'm calling Brenda. We're sorting through Michael's things this weekend. You can pick up your clothes on Monday. Leave the jewelry. Leave the jewelry. My wedding ring. The necklace Michael gave me on our 5th anniversary. A simple gold chain with a tiny diamond pendant. He'd saved for it back when saving still mattered, before Data Bridge, before any of it. I didn't respond. I checked into the hotel, dropped my bag on the bed, and sat on the edge of the mattress staring at the beige wall. The room smelled like industrial cleaner and stale air freshener. The comforter had that scratchy hotel texture that makes your skin crawl. And then I called Patricia Langford. She answered on the second ring, even though it was almost 9 at night. "Ashley," she said. Her voice was calm, measured, the way it always was. Patricia was the kind of attorney who could tell you your house was on fire and make it sound like a weather report. "I've been expecting your call." "She kicked me out," I said. "Karen, she changed the locks." A pause. "Then, she changed the locks on a house she doesn't own." "She doesn't know that." "No," Patricia said, "she doesn't." "Are you safe? Where are you?" "Hampton Inn, off 270. "Okay, listen to me carefully. I need you to come to my office tomorrow morning, 9 o'clock. There are things Michael wanted you to know, things I couldn't tell you until the circumstances required it." "What things?" 9 o'clock, Ashley. Get some sleep." I didn't sleep, not really. I lay on that hotel bed and watched the ceiling and listened to the ice machine humming down the hall, and I replayed every moment of the last 18 months. Michael's diagnosis, the chemo, the way he'd grip my hands so hard during the bad nights that I'd have bruises the next morning, the way he'd whisper plans to me even when he could barely keep his eyes open, plans about the house in Tuscany, about the trusts, about what would happen after. I'd thought he was being anxious, paranoid even, a dying man trying to control what he couldn't control. Now I understood. He wasn't paranoid. He was precise. At 8:47 the next morning, I was sitting in Patricia Langford's office in downtown Columbus. It was the kind of office that whispered money. Dark wood, leather chairs, floor-to-ceiling bookshelves filled with legal volumes that looked like they'd actually been read. Patricia sat across from me in a navy blazer, her silver hair pulled back, reading glasses perched on her nose. Between us on the desk was a thick manila envelope, the one she'd mentioned before, the one marked, "For Ashley, open when she makes her move." "Michael gave me this in July," Patricia said, 3 weeks before he passed. "He was very specific about when you should receive it." "When she makes her move," I repeated. He knew Karen would do this. Patricia took off her glasses and looked at me with something that might have been pity or might have been respect. "Ashley, Michael didn't just know. He documented it. He prepared for it like he was preparing for a product launch. That was who he was." She slid the envelope across the desk. I picked it up. It was heavier than I expected. I broke the seal and pulled out a stack of papers, and on top was a handwritten letter in Michael's careful engineer's handwriting, the letters small and precise, even though toward the end, his hands had started to shake. I read it right there in Patricia's office while the morning sun cut through the blinds and made stripes across the desk. Ash, it began, if you're reading this, then my mom did exactly what I told you she would. And I'm sorry. I'm sorry I couldn't fix her. I'm sorry I spent so many years making excuses for her. I'm sorry I didn't protect you sooner. But I'm protecting you now. My vision blurred. I blinked hard and kept reading. Everything is in your name. The house in Westerville, the accounts, the Tuscany property, all of it. Mom has no legal claim to any of it. Patricia has copies of every document. But here's the part I need you to understand. Mom is going to fight. She's going to say the house was supposed to be hers. She's going to say I promised her things. And Ash, she's not entirely wrong. I looked up at Patricia. What does he mean? Patricia folded her hands. Keep reading. I looked back down at the letter. When Dad died, I told Mom I'd always take care of her. I was 19 and scared, and I made promises I shouldn't have. I told her she'd never have to worry about money. I told her the house would always be there for her. I said a lot of things that a grieving kid says to his mother, and Mom held on to every word like a contract. In her mind, everything I built was partly hers. Every dollar I earned was payment on a debt I owed for the sacrifices she made. But here's what she doesn't know. I did take care of her. There's a separate trust, $800,000, set aside specifically for Mom. It's enough to pay off her mortgage, cover her expenses, and live comfortably for the rest of her life. Patricia has the details. But Mom doesn't get access to it until she accepts the terms. The terms are simple. She treats you with respect. She acknowledges that you are my wife and the rightful heir to my estate. She stops trying to take what isn't hers. If she can't do that, if she fights you, Ash, then you have every right to protect yourself. Use the documents in this envelope. They'll show you everything you need. The letter ended with 3 words that broke me open like an egg. I love you. Live big. I set the letter down and pressed my palms against my eyes. The tears came hard and silent, the kind that hurt your chest and make your shoulders shake. Patricia didn't say anything. She just pushed a box of tissues across the desk and waited. When I finally pulled myself together, I looked through the rest of the envelope. There were copies of the trust documents, the deed to the Westerville house, in my name, transferred 6 months before Michael died, bank statements, the purchase agreement for the Tuscany property, and something I didn't expect, a printed email chain between Karen and Brenda dated August 2023. While Michael was dying, while I was sleeping on a cot next to his hospital bed, holding his hand through the night. The emails were about money. Karen to Brenda, August 3rd. I talked to a lawyer. If Michael dies without a will, Ohio law gives half to that woman and half to blood family. We need to make sure there's no will. Brenda to Karen, August 5th. What do you mean, make sure? He's in the hospital, Mom. Karen to Brenda, August 5th. I mean, we need to talk to him, convince him. He's confused from the medication. He doesn't know what he's signing. If she's been making him sign things, we can contest it. Brenda to Karen, August 8th. I don't feel right about this. Karen to Brenda, August 8th. Your father worked himself to death so Michael could have opportunities. That money belongs to this family, not to some woman he met at a hardware store. Some woman he met at a hardware store. I read that line 3 times. Each time it hit different. The first time, it stung. The second time, it burned. The third time, something cold and hard crystallized in my chest, like a diamond forming under pressure. How did Michael get these emails? I asked Patricia. Brenda, Patricia said simply. She forwarded them to Michael in mid-August. She was uncomfortable with what Karen was planning and thought Michael should know. So Brenda had been the one. Brenda, the quiet younger sister who always sat in the corner at family dinners, who never quite met my eyes, who I'd assumed didn't like me. Brenda had tried to do the right thing. Is Brenda part of the trust? I asked. Patricia nodded. Michael set aside $200,000 for Brenda, with no conditions. He said she'd earned it. I gathered the papers and put them back in the envelope. My hands were steady now. The grief was still there. It would always be there. But layered on top of it was something sharper. Not anger exactly. Purpose. Karen called a locksmith, I said. She changed the locks on a house that's legally mine. Yes, Patricia said. What do I do? Patricia leaned forward. That depends. What do you want to do? I thought about Michael's letter. I thought about the $800,000 trust. I thought about Karen standing in my foyer telling me to go live on the stairwell. I thought about those emails, some woman he met at a hardware store. And I thought about the fact that while I was holding Michael's hand as he died, his mother was plotting how to steal his estate. I want to give her a chance, I said. Michael would want that. I'll offer her the trust. I'll be generous. But if she pushes, Patricia said, we push back. And Ashley, we have significantly more weight behind our push. I left Patricia's office feeling like I was standing on solid ground for the first time in days. I had a plan. I had documents. I had an attorney who could eat Karen's small-town lawyer for breakfast. I was going to do this the right way, Michael's way. Offer the olive branch first. Give Karen the chance to be decent. That hope lasted exactly 4 hours. At 1:15 that afternoon, my phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize. I answered. Mrs. Whitmore? A man's voice, nasal and clipped. This is Gerald Fisk, attorney at law. I represent your mother-in-law, Karen Whitmore. Okay, I said carefully. Mrs. Whitmore, my client is filing a petition to contest any and all estate documents related to the late Michael Whitmore. She is also filing for an emergency order to prevent you from accessing any joint accounts or removing any property from the Westerville residence. Additionally, I repeated. Additionally, my client intends to file a claim of undue influence, alleging that you manipulated Michael Whitmore during his illness to redirect his assets away from his family of origin. The words hit me like a slap. Undue influence. She was claiming I'd brainwashed my dying husband. Mr. Fisk, I said, and my voice was remarkably calm. Does your client have any evidence of this? A pause. The evidence will be presented in due course. I see. And does your client know the full scope of my husband's estate? Another pause. Longer this time. We are in the process of discovery. They didn't know. Karen had hired a lawyer and filed claims against an estate she hadn't even inventoried. She was swinging blind, betting everything on the assumption that Michael's assets were the house, maybe some savings, maybe a retirement account. She had no idea she was poking a $20 million bear. I hung up and immediately called Patricia. Gerald Fisk, Patricia said, and I could hear the thin smile in her voice. Solo practitioner out of Reynoldsburg. Does mostly DUI cases and small claims. Karen found herself a real shark. She's claiming undue influence. Of course she is. It's the only play she has. She'll argue Michael was mentally incapacitated from the glioblastoma and that you took advantage. It won't hold up. I have medical records, competency evaluations, and video testimony from Michael himself, recorded in my office with 2 witnesses present. Michael recorded testimony? 3 sessions, July 2023. He anticipated every single move Karen would make, and he built a firewall around you. That man loved you, Ashley, and he was very, very smart. I sat in my hotel room that night, holding the envelope against my chest, and I thought about Michael sitting in Patricia's office in July, sick and exhausted, recording videos to protect me from his own mother. The image broke my heart and rebuilt it at the same time. But here's the thing about hope. It's fragile, and mine was about to shatter. The next morning, I got a call from Brenda. The first time she'd called me directly in years. Ashley, she said, and her voice was thin, strained. I need to tell you something. Mom found out about the emails, the ones I forwarded to Michael. My stomach dropped. How? She went through my laptop. She knows I told him, and Brenda's voice cracked. She's saying I'm cut out, that I betrayed the family. She's telling everyone, the neighbors, the church, everyone, that you and I conspired against her. Brenda, that's not... I know. But Ashley, there's something else. A long, shaky breath. Mom hired a private investigator. She's been digging, and she found something. I don't know what exactly, but she told Gerald Fisk she has proof that Michael was coerced. She said she has a witness. A witness. My blood went cold. Who? I whispered. I don't know. She wouldn't tell me. But Ashley, she looked confident. More confident than I've ever seen her. Whatever she found, she thinks it's going to win her everything. I hung up and stared at the wall of my hotel room. The beige, featureless, soul-crushing wall. Karen had a witness, someone willing to testify that I'd manipulated Michael, and I had no idea who it was or what they were going to say. I spent the next 3 days in that Hampton Inn room like an animal in a cage. I barely ate. I ordered room service twice, a Caesar salad I picked at, and a bowl of soup that went cold on the nightstand. The housekeeping staff knocked every morning at 10, and I'd call through the door, "No thank you," and listen to their cart rattle away down the hallway. The grief hit differently now that I was alone. At the hospital, there had been structure, nurses, schedules, medication rounds, the steady beeping of monitors that gave the days a rhythm. At home, there had been Michael's things, his flannel shirts in the closet, his coffee mug on the counter, the dent in his pillow that I'd press my face into at night just to smell him. But here, in this anonymous hotel room with its generic art and sealed windows, there was nothing. No structure, no scent, no trace of him anywhere. I'd wake up at 3 a.m. and reach for him, every single time. My hand would slide across the cold sheets, and for one merciful half-second, my sleeping brain would think he was just in the bathroom. Then reality would crash in like a wave, and I'd curl into myself and shake. On the third day, I made the mistake of checking Facebook. Karen had posted a long public post on her timeline, visible to everyone. With a heavy heart, I want to let our community know that my beloved son Michael's widow has abandoned the family home. During this devastating time of grief, when we should be coming together as a family, Ashley has chosen to disappear. I am heartbroken, not only by the loss of my son, but by the actions of someone I welcomed into my family with open arms. I ask for your prayers as Brenda and I navigate this painful chapter. Michael's memory deserves better. 214 reactions, 87 comments. I scrolled through them with numb fingers. Praying for you, Karen. You are so strong. I always thought something was off about her. So sorry, sweetie. Michael was too good for this world. Stay strong, Mama. She left? Right after the funeral? What kind of person does that? That last one was from Jennifer Hadley. The Jennifer Hadley from church. The one Karen always said Michael should have married. I put the phone down. I walked to the bathroom. I gripped the edges of the sink and stared at my reflection. Dark circles under my eyes, unwashed hair, the collar of Michael's old Ohio State t-shirt that I'd packed in my one bag hanging loose around my neck. I looked like someone who'd been shipwrecked. And then I threw up. Not from illness, from the sheer, overwhelming weight of it all. My husband was dead. His mother had stolen my home. She was poisoning the entire community against me. She had a lawyer filing claims I'd brainwashed a dying man. She had a mystery witness. And I was hiding in a Hampton Inn, vomiting into a hotel toilet, completely and utterly alone. That was my bottom, right there, barefoot on cold tile, forehead pressed against the rim of a toilet in a mid-range highway hotel, sobbing so hard I couldn't breathe. I thought about giving up. Not in the permanent sense, not like that, but in the surrender sense. Just walking away. Letting Karen have the Westerville house, taking the money and the Tuscany property and disappearing to Italy and never looking back. What did it matter? Michael was gone. The house was just walls and floors. Let Karen have it. Let her win. I almost called Patricia to tell her exactly that, but then my phone buzzed, and it wasn't Patricia. It wasn't Karen. It wasn't Brenda. It was a text from a number I didn't recognize. Ashley, this is Dr. Rebecca Torres. I was Michael's oncologist at Cleveland Clinic. I heard what's happening, and I need to speak with you. It's important. Can you call me? I stared at the message for a full minute. Dr. Torres. I remembered her. Tall, direct, dark hair always pulled back in a tight bun. She'd been Michael's primary oncologist during the clinical trial. She'd been the one who'd sat us down in June and said the words palliative care for the first time. Michael had trusted her completely. I called her back. Ashley, her voice was warm but urgent. Thank you for calling. Listen, I don't normally do this. Patient confidentiality, professional boundaries, you understand. But Michael gave me written authorization before he passed to share certain information with you if specific circumstances arose. What circumstances? If anyone challenged his mental competency. Ashley, I got a call yesterday from an attorney named Gerald Fisk. He was requesting Michael's medical records, specifically his neurological evaluations and medication logs. He's trying to build a case that Michael was cognitively impaired when he made his estate decisions. My grip tightened on the phone. And was he impaired? Absolutely not. Her voice was steel. Michael underwent 3 separate competency evaluations between May and July of 2023. I ordered them myself because he asked me to. He said, and I'm quoting, "My mother is going to claim I lost my mind. I need proof that I didn't." Every evaluation confirmed full cognitive capacity. His tumor affected motor function, not executive reasoning. He was sharp until the very end, Ashley. I'll testify to that under oath. I sat down on the edge of the bathtub. The cold porcelain bit through my pajama pants. There's something else, Dr. Torres said. The witness Karen's attorney mentioned. I think I know who it is. Who? A home health aide named Marcus Webb. He was assigned to Michael for the last 3 weeks, overnight shifts. I didn't select him. He came through the agency. But Ashley, I reviewed the care logs after Fisk's call, and something didn't add up. Marcus logged several entries noting that Michael appeared confused and unable to make decisions. Those notes directly contradict my evaluations and the nursing staff's observations. Are you saying he falsified records? I'm saying his documentation is inconsistent with every other medical professional who interacted with Michael during that period. And I'm saying that 2 days after Michael died, Marcus Webb was terminated from the agency for an unrelated complaint. But when I called the agency director, she mentioned that someone had been calling about Marcus, asking if he'd be available to provide a statement. Someone. She didn't get a name, but the call came from a 614 area code. Columbus. Karen. It had to be Karen. She'd found the one person in Michael's care team whose records could be twisted, and she was building her case around him. I hung up with Dr. Torres and sat in that bathroom for a long time. The tile was cold under my feet. The fluorescent light buzzed overhead. And something was changing inside me. Something molecular, fundamental, like iron being forged in a furnace. For 3 days I'd been grieving, hiding, shrinking, letting Karen's narrative become the only narrative, letting her Facebook posts stand unchallenged, letting her lawyer file motions while I threw up in a hotel bathroom. Michael hadn't spent his last months building a fortress around me so I could crumble in a Hampton Inn. I stood up. I washed my face. I pulled my hair back. I put on real clothes for the first time in 3 days. Jeans, a blouse, the one pair of shoes I'd packed. I looked at myself in the mirror and I said, out loud, to no one, "Okay, enough." I called Patricia first. Told her everything Dr. Torres had said. Patricia listened without interrupting, and when I finished, she said, "This is better than I hoped. A falsified medical record and a compromised witness. Gerald Fisk's entire case just became a liability for his own client." "I want to move," I said. "Not react, move. I want to file a police report for the illegal lock change. I want to send Karen a formal notice that the house is mine, and I want a meeting, face to face, where I offer her Michael's trust one last time before we go nuclear." "You're sure?" "I'm sure. Michael gave her a chance. I'll give her one more. But Patricia, only one." "Understood. I'll draft the notice today. And Ashley, the police report is smart. Document everything. Every text, every voicemail, every Facebook post. Screenshots with timestamps. I spent the next 2 hours doing exactly that. I screenshotted Karen's Facebook post, the comments, her text to me about changing the locks. I saved every voicemail. There were 4 now, increasingly hostile. I organized everything in a folder on my phone labeled simply KW. Then I made one more call, to Brenda. She answered on the first ring, like she'd been waiting. Ashley, I'm so sorry about the Facebook post. I told her not to. Brenda, stop. I'm not calling to talk about the post. I'm calling because I need you to know something. I paused. Michael left you $200,000. No conditions. He loved you, and he wanted you taken care of. Silence. Then a sound that might have been a gasp or might have been a sob. He also left your mother $800,000 in a trust. But there are conditions, Brenda, and right now she's doing everything possible to make sure she never meets them. I didn't know, Brenda whispered. I didn't know about any money, I swear. I believe you, but I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest. Do you know a home health aide named Marcus Webb? The pause told me everything before her words did. Mom brought him up at dinner 2 nights ago, Brenda said slowly. She said he was willing to testify that Michael didn't know what he was doing at the end. She said he had notes. She seemed excited about it. Ashley, she was excited. At dinner, talking about using a dead man's medical records to... Her voice broke. He was my brother. He was my brother, and she's treating his death like a chess game. Brenda, I need you to do something for me. If your mom mentions Marcus Webb again, or Gerald Fisk, or anything about the case, write it down. Dates, times, exact words. Can you do that? Another pause. Then, quietly, firmly, yes. And Brenda, be careful. If she finds out you're helping me again, I know what she'll do. She'll cut me off. She'll tell everyone I betrayed the family. But Ashley... Her voice steadied. Michael was the only person in this family who ever treated me like I mattered. If helping you is how I honor him, then that's what I'm going to do. I hung up and stood at the hotel window, looking out at the gray Columbus skyline. The rain had stopped. Somewhere behind those clouds, there was sun. I had Patricia Langford and an airtight legal fortress. I had Dr. Rebecca Torres and 3 competency evaluations. I had Brenda on the inside, documenting Karen's every move. I had Michael's own recorded testimony. And I had something Karen would never have, the truth. Tomorrow morning, Patricia would file the police report and send the formal notice. Karen would learn, for the first time, that the house she'd changed the locks on belonged to me, that her son had made sure of it, that her little kingdom was built on sand. But that wasn't what kept me up that night. What kept me up was the meeting, the face-to-face, the one chance I was going to give Karen to take $800,000, walk away with dignity, and let her son's wishes stand. Because I knew Karen. I knew her pride, her entitlement, her absolute certainty that the world owed her everything. And I knew, deep in my gut, that she was going to look at that olive branch and snap it in half. And when she did, when she chose war over grace, I was going to show her exactly what $20 million of preparation looked like. My phone buzzed one last time before I turned off the light. A text from Patricia. Meeting set, Thursday, 10 a.m., my office. Karen and Fisk confirmed. Get some rest. You'll need it. Thursday, 2 days away. The last chance for peace before the storm. I set the phone down and closed my eyes. For the first time in days, I didn't reach for Michael's side of the bed. Instead, I pressed my hand against my own chest, felt my own heartbeat, steady and strong. I'm ready, I whispered to the dark room. I'm ready. Thursday morning arrived gray and cold, the kind of October day that can't decide between rain and just misery. I put on the one decent outfit I had, a black blouse, dark slacks, the shoes I'd worn to Michael's funeral. I looked at myself in the hotel mirror and thought, the last time I wore these shoes, I was burying my husband. Now, I'm about to bury his mother's delusions. Patricia's office was on the 14th floor of a glass tower downtown. I arrived at 9:30, early because Patricia had told me she wanted to walk through the documents one final time. She was already there, standing by the conference room windows with a coffee in her hand, looking out at the Columbus skyline like a general surveying a battlefield. "They'll be here at 10, she said without turning around. "I want you to understand something before they walk in. This meeting is a courtesy. We don't need it. We don't need Karen's agreement, her approval, or her cooperation. Everything Michael arranged is ironclad. We're doing this because you asked for it, because Michael would have wanted it." "I know," I said. "If she takes the trust, this ends today. If she doesn't..." Patricia turned to face me. "If she doesn't, I file a counter motion by noon, and by tomorrow morning, Gerald Fisk is going to wish he'd stayed in the DUI business." At 10:04, the receptionist buzzed. Karen and Gerald Fisk were in the lobby. I heard Karen before I saw her. Her voice carried down the hallway, loud, indignant, already mid-sentence. "Don't care what kind of office she has, Gerald. I know my rights as a mother." They walked in. Karen was wearing her church clothes, a floral blouse, pressed slacks, the gold cross necklace she wore every Sunday. Her hair was freshly done, and she had that look on her face, the one I'd seen 1,000 times across the dinner table. Absolute, unshakable certainty that she was right. Gerald Fisk was a small, nervous man in a suit that didn't quite fit. He carried a leather briefcase that looked brand new, bought for the occasion, I guessed. He glanced at Patricia's office, at the mahogany table and the leather chairs and the wall of legal credentials, and I watched the color drain from his face just slightly. He was out of his depth, and he knew it. Karen didn't notice. She looked at me, and her lip curled. "Well," she said, "nice of you to finally show your face." "Sit down, Karen," I said. My voice was steady, calm. I'd practiced that calm. I'd earned it. They sat. Patricia opened a folder and placed 4 documents on the table, fanned out like cards. "Mrs. Whitmore," Patricia said, addressing Karen, "I'll be direct. My client has asked for this meeting as a gesture of goodwill. Before we begin, I want to establish some facts." She slid the first document across the table. "This is the deed to the property at 4417 Maple Ridge Drive, Westerville. As you can see, ownership was transferred to Ashley Whitmore on March 15, 2023. Michael executed this transfer while fully competent, witnessed by 2 attorneys, and notarized." Karen picked up the document. Her eyes moved across it slowly. Gerald leaned over to look. That can't be right," Karen said. "That's Michael's house. He built that house." "He did build it, and he chose to put it in his wife's name. He was sick. He didn't know what he was." Patricia slid the second document across the table. "These are 3 separate cognitive competency evaluations conducted by Dr. Rebecca Torres, Michael's oncologist at the Cleveland Clinic, May 12th, June 3rd, and July 19th, 2023. All 3 confirm full cognitive capacity. Dr. Torres is prepared to testify." Karen's jaw tightened. Gerald put a hand on her arm, but she shook it off. Patricia continued. "Additionally, Michael recorded 3 video depositions in this office, witnessed and notarized, explicitly stating his wishes for the distribution of his estate. I have copies. The court will have copies." "He was manipulated," Karen said, her voice rising. "She made him..." "Mrs. Whitmore." Patricia's voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. "I understand you've retained a witness, a home health aide named Marcus Webb, who you believe will support your claim of undue influence." Karen's eyes flickered. For the first time, a crack in the certainty. Mr. Webb's care logs have been reviewed by the Cleveland Clinic's medical director. His entries are inconsistent with the observations of every other medical professional involved in Michael's care. Furthermore, the agency that employed Mr. Webb has confirmed that an anonymous caller from a 614 area code, Columbus, contacted them asking about Mr. Webb's availability to provide statements. The agency is prepared to share phone records. The room went silent. Gerald Fisk opened his briefcase, then closed it again. He had nothing in there that could help. Karen stared at the documents on the table. Then she looked at me. "You planned this," she whispered. "You planned all of this." "Michael planned this," I said, "because he knew you, Karen. He knew exactly what you'd do." I reached into my own folder and pulled out the printed email chain, Karen's emails to Brenda. I laid them on the table. "August 3rd, 2023, I said. You wrote to Brenda, 'We need to make sure there's no will.' August 5th, 'He's confused from the medication. He doesn't know what he's signing.' August 8th, 'That money belongs to this family, not to some woman he met at a hardware store.'" Karen's face went white. Not pale, white, like every drop of blood had retreated from her skin. "Brenda," she breathed. "Brenda gave you those. Brenda gave them to Michael, while he was alive. While you were plotting against his wife, your son was reading every word." Karen's hands were shaking. She pressed them flat against the table to stop the trembling, but I could see it, the earthquake happening inside her. "Mrs. Whitmore," Patricia said, and now her voice was almost gentle. Almost. "Despite everything, the illegal lock change, the defamatory Facebook post, the fraudulent legal claims, the attempt to fabricate evidence, my client is offering you a gift. Michael set aside a trust of $800,000 for you. $800,000. Enough to pay off your mortgage, cover your living expenses, and live comfortably." She slid the third document across the table, the trust agreement. "The conditions are simple. You accept Ashley as Michael's rightful heir, you drop all legal challenges, you issue a public retraction of the statements you made on social media, and you treat Ashley with basic human decency going forward." Karen stared at the trust document. Her mouth opened, then closed, then opened again. $800,000, she repeated. "Michael's company sold for—" She stopped. Her eyes widened. "How much? How much was the company worth?" Nobody answered. "How much?" Karen's voice cracked. "Gerald, make them tell me how much." Gerald Fisk cleared his throat. "Patricia, as part of discovery, we would be entitled to—" "You're entitled to nothing," Patricia said. "Your client has no legal standing. She is not a beneficiary, not a co-owner, not a party to any of Michael's business transactions. The only reason she's being offered anything at all is because her son loved her, despite everything." Karen looked at me then, really looked at me, and I saw something I'd never seen in her eyes before. Not anger, not contempt, not that familiar self-righteousness. I saw fear, raw, animal fear. The fear of someone who has just realized they're standing on the edge of a cliff they built themselves. "You're going to take everything," she whispered. "You're going to take my son's legacy and leave me with nothing." I leaned forward. I thought about every Thanksgiving dinner where she'd criticized my cooking, every comment about Jennifer Hadley, every time she'd walked into my home uninvited and rearranged my life, every email plotting against me while I held Michael's hand through the longest nights of my life. "Karen," I said, "I'm offering you $800,000 and dignity. Michael wanted you to have both. You can walk out of here today with more money than you've ever had, and the knowledge that your son, even at the end, tried to take care of you." I paused. "Or you can fight me, and if you fight me, I will use every document, every email, every recording, every falsified medical record, and every competency evaluation to ensure that the only thing you walk away with is a court order and legal fees you can't afford." The room was so quiet I could hear the clock on the wall ticking. Karen looked at Gerald. Gerald looked at the documents. Then he looked at Karen, and gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. Karen picked up the pen Patricia had placed beside the trust agreement. Her hand was shaking so badly she could barely hold it. She signed on the line. Then she set the pen down, pushed back her chair, and stood up. She looked at me one last time, her mouth twisted, not into a sneer, not into a smile, but into something between grief and rage that had no name. "He was my son," she said. "Mine." "He was my husband," I said, "and he chose me." Karen walked out of the conference room. Gerald Fisk gathered his empty briefcase and followed her without a word. The door clicked shut behind them. I sat there for a long time. Patricia didn't rush me. She just stood by the window, drinking her coffee, letting me breathe. "She signed," I finally said. "She signed," Patricia confirmed. "Is it over?" "The legal part? Yes. She waived all claims. The trust is activated. It's over." I pressed my hands against my face. The tears came then, not the violent, breaking kind from the hotel bathroom, but something quieter. Release. The slow unclenching of a fist that had been closed for months. 3 weeks later, I stood in the foyer of 4417 Maple Ridge Drive. My house. The locks had been changed again, back to mine. Michael's flannel shirts were still in the closet. His coffee mug was still on the counter. The dent in his pillow was still there. I walked through every room, touching the trim he'd installed, the cabinets he'd built, the tile he'd laid with his own hands. The house was full of him, not his ghost, but his care. Every corner was evidence of a man who paid attention. Brenda came by that Saturday. We sat on the back porch with coffee and watched the October leaves drift across the yard. She told me Karen had moved to a condo in Gahanna, bought outright with the trust money. They weren't speaking much, but Brenda said Karen was seeing a therapist, first time in her life. "She's not going to apologize," Brenda said. "You know that, right?" "I know." But she signed, and she stopped, and maybe that's the most you can expect from someone like her. I nodded. Maybe it was. In December, I flew to Italy. The farmhouse in Montepulciano was everything Michael had described. Stone walls, olive trees, a terrace overlooking the valley. The realtor had left a bottle of Brunello on the kitchen counter with a note, "Welcome home, Signora Whitmore." I stood on that terrace at sunset, holding a glass of wine, looking at the same view Michael and I had shared years ago. The cypress trees were black against an orange sky. The air smelled like wood smoke and rosemary. Somewhere down the hill, a church bell rang. I thought about the girl in the Home Depot aisle, holding 2 washers, trying to fix a leaky faucet she couldn't afford to call a plumber for. I thought about Michael's crooked smile. I thought about his voice in my ear. Live big. I took a sip of wine. I breathed in the Tuscan air. And for the first time since September, I didn't feel the grief pulling me under. It was still there. It would always be there. But it had changed shape. It wasn't drowning anymore. It was ballast, weight that kept me grounded while I learned to stand on my own. Michael didn't leave me $20 million. He left me proof that I was worth fighting for, worth planning for, worth spending your last breath to protect. Not everyone gets that kind of love. I got it from a guy with sawdust in his hair who knew which washer fit 80% of standard kitchen faucets. And that was worth more than any inheritance.